Hi, I'm Sunny Goldberg, and welcome to Know Your Neighbors. I shouldn't say this, but it's one of my favorite shows we do. We're doing it annually, have been, and I'm sitting here today with Susan Riley, Director of the Mamaroneck Library, and Laura Eckley, Director of the Larchmont Library. We are so lucky in this community to have two such vital libraries with wonderful librarians. And we're going to tell people today what you've been reading, what you suggest, and ideas for holiday shopping and vacation reading, correct?
Absolutely.
Now, who wants to start?
Okay, I'm up first.
You're up first.
Okay. And I'm so happy to promote Very Modern Mantras by our local author, Dan Zevin. Now, I know that, didn't you recently do a show with him?
Yes.
Yes. This is one of my favorite gift book ideas. You know, we all have these little things that drive us absolutely crazy, and this is what this book is about. How do you cope with the crazy people in your life? My favorite in particular, he talks about all kinds of things, cracked screens on cell phones, GPS things that send you all over the universe. But my favorite one is about how do you deal with people who stand up in front of you in a concert.
Oh,
you know, so you paid $150 on StubHub for your favorite artist, and you get there and some lunatic is in front of you, standing and blocking your view while they do air guitar and spill beer all over you.
I don't even like it at the end of the show when people stand up because you can't see the actor.
You can't see anything.
Wow.
So Dan has these very modern mantras to help you cope with the details of ordinary, aggravating, and irritating life. Dan is a local. You've got to support him. He's wonderful. He's a favorite of all the librarians in both libraries.
Yeah. He's a very, very funny author, a very funny person. Yes. And, you know, Susan and I each pick 7 to 8 books to talk about on this show, and this book was on both of our lists.
I saw that.
We both wanted to talk about this book, so I'm just going to chime in and say that I've bought about 4 copies for friends and family members for the holidays, and Dan told us that he wrote parts of the book in both of our libraries.
That's right.
Oh,
and
wow.
If you're on Instagram, Very Modern Mantras has its own Instagram account, and you can follow along with some of the modern mantras and the daily aggravations, especially now that we're in holiday season and there are so many things to be daily aggravated about.
They're just aggravated all the time. All right, Miss Laura, what's up?
So my hostess book choice is Eat Joy, which are stories and comfort food from 31 celebrated writers, edited by Natalie Eve Garrett. Now, this book is going to be discussed at the Larchmont Library's January meeting of we have a cookbook book group called Literary Bites, and we're going to discuss it then.
Such a tremendous idea.
It's so much fun.
Sunny's
joined us.
Terrific.
It's a lot of fun.
And delicious.
And delicious, yes, you're allowed to bring food. But this particular book it's very sweet. It's a perfect gift to give at the holiday times because it's divided into 4 different sections. And one of them is sorrow, one of them is loss, one of them is joy. You know, it has 4 different seasons of emotions, actually. And they're short essays by different writers, many of whom you would know, and then a recipe. And some of the recipes are very simple. There's one for like grilled cheese, and others
are they soothing recipes?
They're recipes that the writers associate with a particular emotion.
That's neat.
And it's a really interesting book. I really wouldn't call it a cookbook, but there are recipes in it. It's really about people's emotional connection to food, how they used food going through difficult times, or how they used food to celebrate in their family and their personal history.
Sounds
it's a
wonderful.
really nice book.
A really nice gift.
And a great hostess gift.
Okay, now we're going to nonfiction.
So we're going to roll right into nonfiction. And you know that I love to talk about food books. So one of my main, love to talk about food writing. One of my main holiday books that I will be giving is Hungry, Eating, Road Tripping, and Risking It All with the Greatest Chef in the World by Jeff Gordner. So this book
The
is
greatest chef in the world, right off the
so
bat.
the greatest chef in the world, according to Jeff Gordner, is Rene Redzepi, who was the owner of Noma, which is a very famous
of
restaurant.
course, yes.
And Jeff Gordner spent
You have to make a reservation like a year in advance.
Really?
at least.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
Wow.
So Rene Redzepi spent, Jeff Gordner spent a year traveling around the world with Rene Redzepi while he was changing Noma into
that's right.
its latest.
We were there when they were redoing yeah.
everything. So this is his experience, and the writer talks about how he was at a crossroads in his life. He was in the process of getting divorced. He was actually very depressed, and he kind of got, sucked into this world of
Food.
rock star chefs and food. He is a food writer, but he had this experience of traveling all over the world with Rene and much of his team and experiencing this whole locavore trend where you eat what is grown locally.
Yes.
So, they did a Noma pop-up in Australia, and they would go out to the beaches and forage for wild watercress.
So are there recipes?
There are not recipes, but there is a lot of food writing, delicious food writing, and it's just an easy read and fascinating. And if you like reading about food and how it's prepared and how chefs live, it's a really great read.
Okay.
My next book is called The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson.
Now, this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you chose this
I
to
love
talk
Bill
about.
Bryson. I've read, he's terrific.
He's amazing.
A wonderful writer.
I've read all of his books: A Walk in the Woods, A Short
Walk in
History
the
of
Woods, I
Nearly
love.
Everything, Home. So Bill Bryson has a long history of writing best-selling books that make seemingly uninteresting nonfiction topics really interesting.
That's The Body?
The Body. So in this book,
right.
he gives us literally a head-to-toe tour of the marvel that is the human body, and it's full of extraordinary facts, and it is what I would call a comprehensive must-read owner's manual for everyone that's walking around in a body.
And if you're not walking around with a body,
Then you don't
you
need
don't
to
need
read
the
it.
book.
Yeah.
then you don't need the book. Right.
He talks about how each section of the body functions and how it heals itself and also how it fails us. And my favorite section was the one on swallowing, which is, it's almost a little bit too much information, and I don't know that I'll ever swallow again the same. It's something that we do so naturally, we don't think about it, we just swallow. Well, there is a lot that goes on to get the food from our mouth down into our stomach. And he writes in such an interesting and also humorous way.
He's very witty.
Very
he
witty.
But a dry sense of humor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say it's a
Screaming, laughing out loud.
laughing book, but
Right.
it will make you chuckle, and it's
Yeah.
very informative.
Great.
So staying on that theme, my next book is called The Nature of Life and Death, Every Body Leaves a Trace by Patricia Wiltshire.
A real upper.
A real upper. So, as you know from past shows, I am a big true crime fan. And I think the first true crime book I ever read was In Cold Blood by Truman Capote.
Yes.
And I read it in college, and I was hooked. And unfortunately, it was mostly downhill from there because most true crime writing is not on that level.
No.
But in recent years, this is an art form, a genre that has really become elevated. There's a popular podcast called Serial, and there are My
That's-
Favorite
Yes.
Murder.
Serial has actually changed.
It has. It's changed the whole true crime, sort of the whole true crime genre. So this is a very well written, very interesting book, and it's written by a forensic ecologist.
Oh.
So you've heard of forensic psychologists, or
Sure.
a forensic ecologist, and she is a scientist who is world renowned and used by police departments all over the world to help them solve
Wow.
difficult crimes, because she's able to look at mold spores and decay and shoe prints from a forensic ecology perspective, and she has an incredible track record of helping police departments solve crimes. And if you're at all interested in true crime, this is an absolute must read.
So it's like a CSI kind of.
It's a
but
CSI
it's
perspective.
more scientific.
I have to buy this book for a good friend of mine who is actually studying to in this field, and she's like close to 50, but this is her passion.
Wow.
And so I bet she would love it.
And
I'll have to put it on my list.
Put it on your list. I bought it for
Yeah.
my 22-year-old who loves watching all of,
yeah.
all of the true
yeah.
crime shows that
Yeah.
are on, and also listening to all the podcasts.
They're
So
probably the number 1, number 2 most watched.
I think so. It's really just it's having a moment. True crime.
Good. Well, it's not like a true crime, but it is a crime. Our book group did Say Nothing by Michael Radin Keefe, and it is a devastating story of the Troubles in Ireland.
Oh.
And I noticed that it was in one of the 100 most notable books in the New York Times. It is painful, but it is so well written, and you are shocked by the stories of how these people could hate each other so much, and how they learn to get into these groups and knock on people's doors and take them out, and they disappear. I cannot tell you, it is not an easy read, but I highly recommend it because you can understand how difficult those times were, and they still aren't straightened out. And it being nonfiction is shocking.
It is. I read this book. I loved it. I think it was probably one of the best books that I read last year.
Yeah.
It's won a lot of awards.
A lot of awards.
And I was lucky enough to hear the author speak about the book, and he is smart and funny and just really interesting. And it's a terrible story.
It is.
About the mom who
it's-
gets pulled out?
Yes,
Well,
it's about
she's
Northern
actually
Ireland.
very
Okay.
minimal. She's the start of the story,
Right.
and the kids see her, but the
Okay.
whole...
And I think that this is a perfect example of where true crime has, when we all think of it for years and years as very pulpy, but this is a truly quality story about a terrible crime and all of the background information about what led up to it and then what happened, the terrible fallout from it.
Oh my God! And the characters, the sisters, the fact that she goes with someone she cared very much about
Right.
and knows he's going to be executed, but rides in the car.
Yeah.
It's a shockingly wonderful book. I highly recommend Say Nothing.
And I second that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, girl, you're up.
We're going to go to some lighter things now.
That one is not light. There's no doubt.
Okay. So people who liked that wonderful book, Eleanor Oliphant is Perfectly Fine, is Completely Fine,
Oh, yeah.
they're going to love this one.
Oh, I
This
really
one
like
that
that.
I'm talking about is called The Cactus by Sarah Haywood. And it's about a British barrister, a young woman who's, well, she's not so young, she's 45, named Susan Green,
She's young.
who is exceptionally controlling in her life. She has like 8 outfits that she rotates through. Her house has exactly what she needs and
Wow.
nothing more and nothing less. And everything about her life is extremely controlled, except that she's very unexpectedly pregnant.
Sounds like OCD
At age
or
45.
something. Yeah, oh, God.
And then
Lord.
the next day, she finds out that her mother has passed away and has left the house to her brother, her horrible brother.
Oh, no.
So this is a book about how she gets back at her brother, how she regains what is rightfully hers, and how she comes to terms with a life that is not so neatly in a box.
Great.
And she learns to thrive like that. So
Okay.
it's set in London. It's that side of the pond, and it's a wonderful book
Cactus.
and a fun book to read.
Okay, next.
And then we go to Detroit, and we talk about Mrs. Everything.
I actually read that.
And you read that and you loved it, didn't you?
It was a very
Yes.
fun read.
Jennifer Weiner is really a terrific writer, and this one is mostly through the eyes of a young girl named Bethy and her older sister named Jo. Now, Jo is everything that Bethy is
It's
not.
not, exactly.
Jo is athletic, and she is very tomboyish, and she's very focused in school, and she does extremely well. She excels at everything, except for the fact that Jo is not so much into a typical 1950s housewife sort of a life.
Right. She doesn't want to get married, have children. She's
She does
on her-
not. And her sister Bethy is all those things. She's soft and she's sweet and she's pretty and she's kind and she's not quite as good at school, but their life changes, and it changes just like the political climate is changing in the 60s and 70s, and women's rights are coming up, and civil rights, and all these things are happening in these girls' lives, and they themselves are changing as well. If you like a book that's about generational things, if it's about relationships between sisters and how their lives turn completely in different directions than what you ever would expect, you will really enjoy Mrs. Everything.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And do I have another one
Yeah,
here?
City of Girls, I think you may have said.
City of Girls
Another
is
great one.
such a wonderful book. Okay. This book is set in 1940, and it's set in New York City.
And it's Elizabeth Gilbert who.
Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Eat, Pray, Love,
Right.
and she wrote a couple of other things that were wonderful. And this book is a complete 180 turn, different, a historical fiction book. So Vivian Morris is 19 years old, and she's just been thrown out of Vassar for basically not doing anything except going to parties.
Okay. Cost her parents some money. But
I'm sure. And as punishment, she is sent to live with her Aunt Peg, who's very flamboyant and eccentric and owns a playhouse in New York City called The Lily.
Oh,
and
how much
so,
fun.
You're right, right.
What kind of punishment is that?
So Vivian has like pretty much zero talent in anything whatsoever. I mean, she's flunked out of school.
Right.
She doesn't have a steady boyfriend, so she's not getting married to upper crust. But what she can do is she can sew. And so what she becomes is like
Wow.
the costume director for all these silly little plays.
How much fun.
And they're fighting to keep the Lily open during the 1940s when everything is crashing and the Depression is going on and all those kinds of things. And she begins to rise, okay, until something really terrible happens because she's so flighty and she has to change her life to move forward in a positive fashion. This is such a fun book to read. This is one of those books that I gave my mother.
She gets a lot.
My mother gets so many
I know
books
she
from me
does.
too. She really does. She really does.
I'm in
And
competition
she gave
with
it
that
to.
mother. I get them after.
You have to meet my mother someday.
I do.
She gave it to her book group, and they all discussed it, and they all loved
Oh,
this
how
book.
wonderful.
So pick up City of Girls if you want a really fun read.
Okay, Laura.
Okay, so
We've only
moving on
got
to my fiction
more than
picks.
halfway through. So
Oh boy, we're moving along.
We can go fast.
So this book that I'm recommending is called 21 Truths About Love by Matthew Dix, and it is a fiction novel. And I will just say that I love a gimmick when it comes to a novel. I love epistolary novels, novels that are written as letters, diary entries,
things
anything
that go back
like
and
that.
forth, and
I love it. Any kind of, I'll call it a gimmick, but it is a way of telling a story, and it's really my favorite way to read a book is when it has some kind of unusual presentation like that. So this book is a first for me. It's written entirely in lists. And while that sounds impossible, it works.
Wow.
So the story is told through lists that the main character, Dan, makes to tell the story. And he is, in life, a very, focused, list-making, controlled person. He has quit his job and opened a bookstore, and he has a pregnant wife, and the bookstore is failing, and she doesn't know it. So this is the story of what Dan does to save his family, really, and his life, and it's told in the form of lists. It works. You're going to have to trust me, and his voice is so clear because of the way that it's presented.
Organized, yeah.
And he's Dan, our main character. He's very funny. So all throughout this terrible story that he's telling, there are also, there's also a lot of humor, and it's a very sweet book. I really recommend
and
it.
you've got one more.
One more. This is the second book that Susan and I both had on our list.
Oh, right.
This is I got this one, The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes, and you'll understand why we both wanted to talk about this book. So the main character, Alice, marries an American. She's from England, and moves to small town Kentucky, where she quickly finds herself to be really unhappy. And at that point in time, Eleanor Roosevelt puts out a call asking for women to deliver books. as part of a traveling library.
Oh
And
my God! Wow.
Alice eagerly signs up and becomes part of the Pack Horse Librarians of Kentucky. So this is a book about 5 women who become very good friends, 5 very strong women who, take a bit of grief from men and don't accept it. They
Did they
stick
talk
up
about
for
the
themselves.
books that they're delivering?
They talk about the books. They talk about the
Oh,
experience.
good.
They talk about the beauty of the landscape
Wow.
of Kentucky
Yeah,
and really how hard it is to deliver books by horse in rural Kentucky. This was not an easy job, and these women
They faced a lot of danger.
They did.
They really, and a lot of opposition because a lot of the men did not
like what
want
they were doing.
their
Yeah.
wives to become uppity by reading books, or their
God.
children
Oh my
to
God.
become educated, because then the children would be better than them.
That sounds so
know.
good.
And this was
Yeah.
really their mission. They really saw it as a mission to make sure that people who did not have access to books and really information received that information, and they brought it to them on horseback. So we share that mission in our libraries,
good.
and we don't have to bring it to people on horseback anymore, but we would if we had to.
You still bring it to people
right.
all the time.
That's right.
Through
Very true.
LMC-TV. I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
And
I'm
JoJo
gonna-
Moyes has written a bunch of other
She has,
books that are
terrific.
so popular, and
Yeah.
this one is a real
It's
departure.
very different. This is
Yeah.
she usually writes contemporary books, and this
Yeah.
is a historical novel, and
Right.
she's up to the task. And I hope she continues to write in that genre. It's interesting.
I have
Me too.
one, a couple more, but one, The Dutch House, which is on the bestseller list. People have loved it. A brother and a sister who start out life very well connected. Father has all kinds of money. The mother leaves, and he's to raise them. And lo and behold, he meets a woman. They live in this magnificent kind of mansion-y house, and she moves in, and she's the worst stepmother you can possibly imagine. And they are thrown out of the house. I don't want to tell too much. And it's their way of looking at her and their lives and what happens. And it's constantly fighting. They lose their inheritance to her. The only thing they get is their education, because the father had deemed that in their will. So very well accepted. The Dutch House by Anne Patchett.
Patchett. She's a wonderful author.
Terrific
She's
author.
terrific, and there's also an audiobook of this
you said.
title, and it's narrated by Tom Hanks, who portrays the son
Yeah,
in the book.
because the son is the narrator.
Through his eyes,
Right. And now you've got one by Nevada.
Nevada Bar.
Yeah.
Okay. So most people who read mysteries or thrillers or whatever, they know Nevada Bar. Most of her books take place in the national parks. And
That's true. I love that. Usually with
I love the
Indian,
national parks. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Ooh, we only got 5 minutes,
And
so-
Anna Pigeon is her normal character. But
That's
this is
right.
a complete read-alone book called What Rose Forgot. And it starts out with an elderly woman waking up in an Alzheimer's unit in a nursing home and has no idea how she got there.
Wow.
Wow.
Zero recall. And she realizes that they've been giving her extremely high doses of medication. And when that medication leaves her system, she makes a decision that she is going to escape.
Oh my God.
So this is What Rose Forgot. It's by this wonderful author, Nevada Bar.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different type of a story.
Great.
And it's a standalone. You
It
don't
is a
have to read
standalone,
it.
yes.
It's not part of
Yes.
the series.
And that's also
That's right.
nonfiction. That's also fiction.
Yeah.
It is
Okay.
fiction, absolutely. Now, one of my favorite books, though, is a very funny book called There's Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And this book is about 2 young women who were roommates in an exclusive school, and the poor roommate gets thrown out. She takes the blame for something that the rich roommate actually did. And years later, the rich girl calls her up and says, listen, come work for me, because she's working retail.
That's right.
She says, please come work for me. And she says, I want you to take care of my husband's children, his twins from his first marriage. And she says, okay, I don't have anything better to do. I'll do this. And when she gets there, she finds out that the reason she's being asked to take care of them is because when they get upset or angry, they go on fire. They
right.
spontaneously combust.
It's unbelievable. I read about this book and I said, how could that be?
It is hysterically funny. I mean, first she has to re-outfit the house with sprinklers all over the place. They have to get pyrotechnic gel to put on the kids because their clothes like burst into flame all the time. And they have to be right near a pool so they can throw the kids into the pool if anything happens to them.
Oh.
It's a very, very funny story. And yet there's also like this whole level in there of compassion and care for these two pretty much unwanted children.
Is that an unusual?
It's a very unusual book. He also wrote a very funny book previously called The Family Fang, which got rave reviews.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was very popular.
And my final book
Yes.
to talk about today is another one that's one of my favorites. And I have to thank our librarian, Jack Weiss, for telling me about this. Now, have you been hearing that commercial on TV about Con Edison and their decommissioning Indian Point and everything?
Right.
Okay. Every time I hear that commercial now, I get panicky because this book is about a decommissioned building like in Arizona
This
or
is
somewhere.
Cold storage?
Cold storage. And
Oh, gosh.
a biological fungus has been interred way underground in the 4th sublevel where it's really, really cold. But what's been happening since this occurred 30 years previously is that climate warming, climate, you know.
Yeah.
So you loved it.
I loved it.
Okay.
The fungus starts spreading. There's all kinds of gore. This is by the screenwriter for Jurassic Park.
Oh,
and
good.
it is going to be a wonderful
Full
movie.
Okay.
A wonderful movie.
I very quickly am going to tell you, I read the Testaments in no time. It's the follow-up to The Handmaid's Tale. It's Aunt Lydia becomes the hero or heroine, whatever. She is so evil. And 15 years later, if you don't enjoy it, I would be shocked. I couldn't put it down, and I think it's on the #1 or #2 bestseller list.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's so popular in our libraries, we cannot keep it on the shelves.
Right.
We've got multiple copies.
And it's a great gift for anyone that's watching the TV series, The Handmaid's Tale.
Exactly. It's
Absolutely.
a fun
Yep.
follow-up gift. I have to tell you now, all of these lists will be on your websites,
They're not yet on ours, but they will be.
okay? And
We have lists up on our website. We're not doing print. We're not doing paper lists this year. We're going green.
that's much way
but
to do
they're
it.
on our
Yeah.
website. Yep.
And they'll see it, and we're going to run it at the end of our program. We always do that. But I can't thank you enough. I must say, Susan, we are going to miss you.
Thank you so much.
Tribute to you.
Yeah.
Susan, if you don't know it, is retiring from
am.
the Mamaroneck Library. How long have you been there?
I've been there 8 years.
8
Laura
years.
and I actually started at our respective libraries at the same time.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
I'm very sad. I'm happy for her, but I'm personally very sad to see her go.
Well, we wish you all the best. Laura, thank you. You promise you won't
I
desert
promise.
me?
No,
You'll keep it going?
I'll be back here talking about beach books with you.
Oh, wonderful. And happy holidays to both of you.
To you too.
And to all of you out there watching, we wish you the best of holidays. Go buy books. It's the best gift you can give. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.